Okay, if parts of me are sparkling unexpectedly during this video, all I'll say is, there's been a glitter incident. I don't want to talk about it. Let's just move on. In 2021, I started and quite quickly abandoned a charity stitch-along from PixStitch that they were calling The Pixels That Made Us. It's a very cool design smooshing all kinds of video game characters together into the word gamer. At the time, this room was primarily our couple's gaming room, and I thought, why not? It's for charity and it'll look great in here. So I just dove right in. Almost 4 years later, I dug this abandoned mess out again for the April edition of 24 Hours of Cross Stitch. And you know, looking at this with the perspective of much more stitching experience really taught me a lot. So first of all then, why did I suddenly decide to get back on with this? Well, my plan for that weekend was actually a new start. I had a printed cross-stitch kit de-stashed to me by a friend, and I've never done printed cross-stitch, so I just wanted to give that a whirl. Sadly, when I opened the kit the night before to get the lay of the land, it turns out it wasn't printed at all, it was just regular counted cross-stitch. I didn't really fancy that, so I needed a new plan, and, well, basically this project happened to be in a basket in arm's reach at the time. So bonus lesson 0, if you are taking part in 24 Hours of Cross Stitch and you have a specific project in mind, maybe check that everything's in order earlier than the night before. Don't be like me. The first thing you might notice about this project is it calls for a lot of colours. This was kind of good in a way because I still didn't have much of a stash of floss at the time, so buying what I needed even just for the G probably tripled the amount of DMC I owned. But I did need to buy only for the G, because having so many colours meant that this was really expensive by my standards. In my enthusiasm to get started, I'd chosen to make that a future me problem, but the expense was part of the reason I ended up hibernating this for so long. Coming back to it now, I still needed to go out and buy quite a few, but a lot less than I would have needed 4 years ago, so it was much more manageable. Lesson 1, pay attention to how many colours a pattern calls for before you buy it. And also lesson 2, have some kind of inventory system so you can tell which ones you're missing. I covered how I use this spreadsheet to track my floss stash in a recent video, so feel free to go check that one out. But this didn't exist back when I started the stitch along, and it was so much easier now I have a way to track things. Another thing that I didn't really think about before starting this project is just how big it is. It was by far the biggest project I'd taken on at the time, both in terms of stitches and also just the physical size of the thing. Back then, I was stitching everything in hand, which works great for smaller projects, but not so much for something 3 feet wide. Definitely a huge reason I gave up on this. Nowadays, of course, I've discovered the joys of Q-snap frames, but most of all, my beloved Lowry workstand. This video is not sponsored by Lowry, and neither is the original one where I bang on about how amazing it is, but it's no exaggeration to say this changed my stitching life, and I simply would not be working on some of the projects I can now work on without it. Complete game changer! If a supervillain had me choose between saving the life of A, the Lowry stand, or B, my actual husband, I'd have to stop and think about it. So yes, lesson 3. Your stitching setup can make all the difference. And as most of you know, I am not the type to go in for fancy equipment and accessories. I think they're often nice to have, but not essential. So for me to be so won over is very, very rare. Somewhere out there exists your perfect setup, and I definitely encourage you to go out and find it. Now, something that I did pay attention to and thought I was making the right choice in was this fabric. It's very bright, and I thought it would look fabulous on the yellow wall in what again was our couple's gaming room. And I stand by that, I think it would have looked great. But what I didn't know back then, and have since learned the hard way, is lesson 4. Fabric choice also makes a huge difference. I stitch on black and other dark colours sometimes, and I've never really had a major issue. But there's something about this bright royal blue. I just can't focus on it. It genuinely hurts my eyes to look at for an extended period of time. I'd remembered hating it, but I thought maybe past me was just exaggerating, until I sat down for the first of 24 hours stitching on it, and I realised mistakes had definitely been made. So this is 14 count, and usually for 14 count projects, I'll stitch with 2 strands. This looks fine to me on lighter fabrics. I don't even really mind that it gets a bit patchy on darker fabric. I know that does bother some people, but it's just personal preference, you know? But apparently, 2021 Michelle decided that 2 strands just wasn't enough coverage on this fabric and went with 3 instead. Since then, I have definitely settled into a comfortable rut with my stitching. I've tried all kinds of techniques and tools and I've figured out what works for me. And what works for me is a 2-strand loop start. So having to go back to 3 strands, I mean, I can do it, it's fine, but at the same time I'm like having a complete tantrum inside because this is just not how I stitch. But it was kind of valuable too, because if we're honest, 2 strands often doesn't look best on certain types of fabric. No argument here. But this taught me lesson 5. I would honestly rather have that patchy coverage than ever stitch with 3 strands ever again. And that's okay, I think. It's important to know these things about yourself. Lesson 6. Pattern keeper or markup app of your choice is totally worth it. I remember trying this pattern in Pattern Keeper when I first got my hands on it, and some of the files half worked and others didn't work at all, and basically I decided it wasn't worth the hassle of manually entering all the colours into the app. I was wrong. This time round I wasted a good couple of my 24 hours just repetitively adding numbers until my eyes were genuinely stinging. But it makes the stitching part so much more enjoyable, so much less prone to error. I wish I could reach back through time and give my past self a shake, because she just has no idea how much trouble this one bad decision is going to cause. Now lesson 7 is something I kind of hate to say, because this is by no means a bad pattern, there's nothing wrong with the design, but I just don't enjoy stitching it. And even on a revisit with all of my experience since I started, even if I was stitching with 2 strands and I'd used Pattern Keeper from the start, I still think I would hate this because all of this confetti is just not me. And the thing is, I kind of did get that vibe before purchasing it, but I got carried away and I went through with it, and yeah. Lesson 7, listen to your gut. Sometimes a pattern just isn't gonna be fun. So why didn't I do that? Why did I get carried away? Well, the simple answer is because all of my Instagram friends at the time were stitching this and I wanted to be part of the gang. I was a relatively new stitcher and I was making all of these cool friends and I just wanted them to think I was cool too. And obviously, with a bit of distance, that's stupid as hell, and also, I'll never be cool. But at the time, it did seem quite important, as these things sometimes do. So lesson 8, peer pressure and FOMO are definitely your enemies. I would love to have 2 more lessons here to make it a nice round 10, but alas. The truth is, I think what revisiting this project taught me more than anything else is just how much more comfortable I am in my stitching nowadays. I have the necessary equipment, but I'm also kind of past the trial and error stage with technique. I can cross country, I can park, I can, but never really do, pin stitch, and I definitely own a decent enough range of flosses that most projects aren't costing me an arm and a leg. Our last lesson for the day then is that experience counts for a lot. And that seems pretty obvious, but I think it is only when you go back to an old project like this and you revisit what the thought process was at the time and the mistakes that you made that you really see how far you've come. So have you ever picked up a project that you started years ago? Have I maybe inspired you to try? You never know, maybe you'll learn some interesting lessons of your own. Much appreciation as always to the channel supporters over on Ko-fi, and special shout out to the Stitch Squad. Marianne Johnson, Sunny, Candy Riley Pettinger, Laura Salets, Enlightened Flamingo, Angela Sue Harrison, Cross Stitch the Globe, Emily Hobbs, Lee the Cozy Crafter, Sarah, Angela Wells, Enraged Flamingo, Alicia, Louise T, Mel, Juliana Banana, Stacey Ann, Tammy G71, and Tapawa Vulcan. I'll be back soon with some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye! Off you go, little project, back into your bag of doom. Maybe we'll see you again in another few years.